Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be on this well-represented panel and to participate in this conference, which is devoted to the legacy of the ICTY. The international tribunals must have a lasting impact on bolstering the rule of law in a particular society. And the starting point for me is that the main purpose of these tribunals, bringing those most responsible for the mass atrocities and serious international crimes to justice through conducting fair and effective trials, contributes to a more just and fair society through ending impunity. Without civil society and human rights defenders, this important work of countering impunity through international trials would never have seen the light of day, and therefore I salute the civil society organizations who made ICTY and ICTR and other tribunals possible. So the focus of this panel is on residual mechanisms, on archives, and on information centers. I should say in this context that my office, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, has published 9 tools to assist societies emerging from conflicts in the transitional justice area. And 2 of these tools are relevant to this discussion. The first is on maximizing the legacy of hybrid courts, and the other is on archives. Both publications are available for you outside. Now, there is no doubt that the ICTY and the ICTR had remarkable impact in advancing international law through their jurisprudence and through inspiring the creation of the International Criminal Court. It is now recognized that there is a need for residual mechanisms to ensure that fugitives will not escape justice and to address other important legal concerns that may arise. Equally important in terms of legacy is the impact of the ICTY on national courts. The ICTY jurisprudence is already widely cited by national judges from all over the world. There is some sharing of practices. From our side, I was pleased that my office was able last year to facilitate expert discussions on issues such as witness protection amongst international courts and tribunals so that they can share lessons learned and practices. And so I am confident also that a publication like the ICTY Manual on Development Practices and the ones on lessons learned and best practices in knowledge transfer will help practitioners in the Balkans and other parts of the world. This work has already started some time ago under the presidency of Judge Gabriel MacDonald with the outreach program that she had initiated when she was president of the ICTY. Courts are there to dispense justice, but also to establish an historical record. This is particularly important in war-torn societies, where often there is no common understanding of what happened. There is no doubt that all communities have the inalienable right to know the truth about past events, about the crimes and the circumstances and reasons that led to the perpetration of those crimes. Full and effective exercise of the right to truth provides a vital safeguard against the recurrence of violations. This is why it is important that appropriate measures are put in place to preserve and make available the archives and other evidence concerning violations of human rights and humanitarian law. Such measures guard against the development of revisionist and negationist arguments. I am pleased that our panel will focus on ideas aimed at ensuring that the ICTY's documentary collection is appropriately preserved, secured, made more accessible, particularly for legal, judicial, and research purposes. So with these brief remarks and without further delay, I would like to give the floor to the panelists. The panel, that is, intends to use 1 hour of the time so that participants in the audience will have a greater time, a further hour for your questions, comments, and contributions. We have 4 topics which were outlined for us by the MC, and we intend to take each question at a time and have some or other of the panelists address those questions. Then we follow through all 4 questions, and then we will open the floor to you. So the first question then is, what kind of role will the Security Council play in preserving the Tribunal's legacy through the residual mechanisms? And so maybe the proper question is, what is and what should be the role of the United Nations Security Council? So here I would like to invite Konrad Buller, legal advisor, permanent mission of Austria in the UN, where Austria was the chair of the Security Council Informal Working Group in International Tribunals. If you would like to begin then, Konrad. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this very timely conference, and I'm very honored to be a member of this very distinguished panel. At the outset, let me start with 2 disclaimers. First, it seems that I'm the only government representative here on this panel, and it goes without saying that everything I say today I do in my personal capacity, and my words should not be attributed neither to the government of Austria nor to the Security Council Working Group. And the second disclaimer is the fact that I just arrived from New York this morning with a red-eye flight, so if I am saying something incoherent, then I could argue that I was not in full possession of my senses. So I hope you bear with me. What is the role?
But you are going to share with us what the deliberations of the working group has achieved so far. Yeah.
So what role does the Security Council have in preserving the Tribunal's legacy? I think it goes without saying that the Security Council, as the parent of the 2 ad hoc tribunals, so to say, has a key role and responsibility as well in preserving the Tribunal's legacy in the long term. And the Security Council is assuming its responsibility through its informal working group on international tribunals. And this working group was established in 2000 as an informal gathering of the legal advisors of the Security Council members. It met only on an ad hoc basis, and until 2008, when it was decided to appoint a permanent chair, and Belgium was the first chair in 2008, and since January 2009, when Austria became a member of the Security Council for its 2-year term, Austria had the honor to chair that working group. The key task of that working group currently is the discussion about the establishment of a future residual mechanism to carry out certain functions of the ICTY and the ICTR after their closure. And it's worth mentioning that the Security Council, in a presidential statement in December 2008, acknowledged the need to establish a residual mechanism to carry out a number of essential functions of the tribunals, including in particular the trial of fugitives after the closure. So the Security Council has publicly acknowledged the need that there must be something after the tribunals to ensure that there is no impunity gap. That is, I think, a very important premise, a basis on which the working group is performing its work. A very important step in the deliberations was the Secretary General's report, which was also requested at the same, in the same presidential statement. And that report was issued in May 2009, and it analyzes the various options for possible locations of the archives of the ICTY and ICTR, and the seat of a future residual mechanism. And that it analyzes also the 8 residual functions that have been determined by the tribunals. And based on that report, and it was also already alluded to at the previous panel, the working group in September 2009 reached agreement on 2 of those recommendations, which are addressed to the tribunals. And we call it internally, it's the housekeeping matters, or the cleaning of the desk. So these are some tasks which the Security Council has asked the tribunals to do before they close their doors. This includes the sensitive issue, and it has been mentioned this morning, about the possible review of witness protection orders. It includes the question of preparing the archives, digitizing, for instance, the archive, the records, includes the development of an information security strategy, and also the feasibility study on information centers that was undertaken by the ICTY recently. So, in the last year, the working group spent several months in having an in-depth discussion of all the potential residual functions of a future mechanism. And in the second half of the year, it started discussing a new draft resolution prepared by the chair with the help of the legal office on the establishment of such a future mechanism. And I would just briefly outline, if you bear with me for 1 or 2 more minutes, what are the key issues that are currently being discussed. And I just name them, and later on I might elaborate further. The first is the question of the structure and organization of the mechanism. The second big question is the location of the mechanism and the archives, and here the issue of co-location of mechanism and archives comes into play. The third is the question of the commencement date. When should that mechanism start its work? The fourth is the key function of the mechanism will be the trial of fugitives, so no impunity for the senior fugitives that are still at large. The fifth is which residual functions should be exercised by the mechanism, or are there some functions which could be transferred to national jurisdictions or other bodies? And finally, of course, and this will be also a key issue at this panel, the question of archives, management of archives, and establishment of information centers. And just one sentence on the way ahead. After the first reading of the resolution in December last year, we looked at the various comments and produced a revised draft resolution, and also asked the Office of Legal Affairs to prepare a draft statute of a residual mechanism, which is based on the 2 statutes, current statutes of ICTY and ICTR, and also with input from the discussions and from the Secretary General's report. And that resolution with its annexed statute will be discussed at the beginning of March. Thank you.
So was this just a government representatives holding a closed working group, or have you reached out and found out what the affected communities want in this matter?
Well, outreach and transparency is an important element of our work. And in Austria, when we campaigned for the Security Council, this was one issue where we stressed we would try to do better. And the mere fact, I mean, the existence, this working group had quite some obscure existence. Nobody knew about it until some years ago.